Welcome to this short video on ASHRAE's Building EQ tool. In this video, we want to talk about how the Building EQ tool can help universities with their energy performance needs. Now, when we talk about universities, we often hear people say, well, that's institutional work. Well, that doesn't really describe what a university is like. It would be better to consider them a mini city. I mean, these facilities have a huge number of buildings. As you can see, the University of Central Florida has 180 buildings on its main campus. And we've got, they're going to have office areas and lecture halls and with labs and restaurants and cafeterias. You got apartments for all the students. And a lot of universities have hospitals attached to them, and so they're more like a mini town. And another thing about these buildings is there's often radically different uses of the spaces within the same building. So some floors could be used for office space and others for lecture halls or whatever. And that adds some more challenge to how do you look at the energy performance of all the assets. And of course, universities are commonplace to see, central heating and cooling plants, cogen facilities. They really do behave like a mini city, and so the tools have to help them manage the whole portfolio. So another thing about universities that we should always remember is a very sophisticated customer, right? They have staff, they pay a lot of attention to their operating, they have perhaps one of the best long-distance views about their buildings. Think about your alma mater. When was the last time you saw your home university consider selling off a building? It just doesn't happen, and so they look way into the future. They're very interested in the impact of their buildings on the planet, but they're also very interested in creating great built environments for the students and the staff that work in these places. And their energy bills are significant, right? So it's not unusual to see their energy bills to be in the tens of millions of dollars. And so they're very interested in how are their assets working and what they need to do to make them better. And ASHRAE works very closely with APA. So APA is the Association of Higher Education Facilities Managers. This is a group of people that are running, most of the universities and higher education places in North America. And we work together to come up with solutions to how do we make these universities meet their goals, their long-term goals around energy and carbon and, of course, indoor environment. And a lot of work together on the Building EQ tool to make sure that it meets the university needs. So we've talked about universities. Let's talk a little bit about Building EQ. So it is a web-based portal, and it's you go to this tool, you put in some information, and it will benchmark your building. It answers a really simple question. Imagine you had an office building in Chicago. Well, how well does your office building compare with other office buildings in Chicago? That's the question that we mean when we say benchmarking, which is my building as good? Is it better? Is it worse? If it's better, you can celebrate it. You could get an ASHRAE, a Building EQ award. If it's worse, then we're starting a conversation about how to make that building raise its performance to meet your expectations. So it calculates an EUI in the background, and that's an energy use intensity. It's how many BTUs of energy are you using per square foot per year, and we compare it to other buildings in your climate zone that have a similar use. So not an energy modeling tool, not meant to replace a zone-by-zone 87, 60-hour tool that a consulting engineer would use in the design process to compare different HVAC systems or understand the impact of the envelope. This is a benchmarking tool. Now, in the benchmarking world, you can do in operation. That's what we just talked about right now, where we're looking at, how does it work on the energy side. But you can also do something called an as designed. And the fast answer for example of an as designed is imagine you had two identical buildings across the street from each other. And one of them was a call center and it ran 24 hours a day. And the other one on the other side of the street was just a regular office building that was opened, let's say 8 or 9 hours, 5 days a week. Clearly, at the end of the year, the call center is going to use more energy than just the regular office building, but the assets were the same, right? They were identical buildings. So as design normalizes the use, so you're looking at just the asset. So you're saying, hey, I'm going to take out how you're going to use this building and just look at its capabilities. And the nice thing about the Building EQ tool is it does both models in the same platform. It's the only tool out there that does both in operation and as designed. You can, and that sometimes is very helpful to have both when you're looking at how to improve a building performance. So a little bit more about the in operation, which is really important to the universities. It's going to you are going to load your energy bills in for that building, and then it's going to look at, as we said, how it's designed, used, and operated, right? And so in the Building EQ tool, we give you a rating from 0, which is net zero, that's a great score, to 200, which would suggest that your building is quite underperforming relative to similar buildings in a similar climate zone. And you get this nice little chart over here. As you can see, this building is doing very well relative to the average. And so in this example, we use the score to help rate buildings and then decide what to do next. So one of the things that we built into Building EQ was an ability in this tool to manage a portfolio of buildings. So this is just a perfect example is to help universities that can have 100 or 150 buildings on them. You can have them all in this database through here. And the nice thing about this is you can have the facilities people at the university could have the master list and the master file, but then they can allow all sorts of people to have access to specific programs. So you could come along and say, you know what, we're going to hire an outside contractor to do this energy audit on this building and go in and do some analysis. I'm going to allow them access to this one building, but not the rest of my portfolio. They can put the data right into the tool for the facilities people. When they're finished, they'll have everything in one spot. And another one, you might be using in-house facilities people to go and do that model. So it allows you to have multiple third-party contractors as well as your own staff. You could even do one in 1 year and then allow a different contractor, come back a year later and redo the audit to see if some of the performance had in fact improved the building, and be able to track that. Everything's right here in one spot where you can see it and then do a deep dive into the files. So nice for managing a wide portfolio of buildings. Now, we mentioned early on that just the range of building types and space use that you see in a university, from lecture halls to labs to common areas, of course, a lot of dormitories and residential applications, so lots of different space uses, and each one of these things has a different energy level expectation. And so if you're going to use a tool for a university, it has to have an extensive range of building types in it. And Building EQ has one of the widest ranges available to you for all sorts of classifications of buildings and subgroups. And a couple we want to call out that came out of our work with APA that was really important to the university groups was multiple use buildings. And this would allow you to come along and say, well, we've got lab space mixed in with lecture halls and graduate level office space, meeting rooms, so you could have 3 or 4 different types of building use in one building. If you can't do multiple use buildings, then you have to pick. Is it an office? Is it a class? Is it a lab? And you're going to compare yourself against other buildings. You probably won't score well. It won't make sense because what are you comparing yourself to? We allow you to break this building down and assign percentages of the building to different kinds of building types. So very, very powerful and very helpful in university applications. Another thing that came up very quickly in our work with APA was their focus on labs. And labs are going to score as one of the highest energy use types of buildings in the market. No surprise there. They often run extensive hours, perhaps 24 hours a day, and a lot of internal energy gain in these spaces. And so even if you have a small percentage of the building has a lab area in it, it will skew the result. You couldn't come along and say that you have an academic building and just compare it to other academic buildings that only had lecture halls. If 20% of that building had lab space in it, it would absolutely skew your benchmark. And so we worked really closely with Labs 21, and we developed an extensive lab benchmarking tool into Building EQ that can be used for universities or any other kind of building types, but will allow you to go in and put in the details of your lab. And you can have multiple lab types. You can change the hours of operation, and you can talk about what percentage of the building has labs. So really helps you understand why the energy use in one building can be so much higher than the other. If you've got labs in it, it should be expected that it's going to have a higher energy usage. The other thing that happens a lot at universities is they centralize the cooling plants. You can imagine two buildings. One has a chiller and a boiler plant in the basement, and then the identical building across the street is connected to a central plant. And you just look at the energy at the meters coming in. I mean, the building that has the chiller and the boiler plant is going to seem to have a very high energy use. But that's not fair, right? Because the building across the street that's hooked to a central plant is getting energy into it. It's just you need a way to recognize that energy consumption and account for it so that you can decide that those two buildings are a more apples-to-apples comparison to those two building types. So building EQ allows you to have centralized plants, chiller plants, boiler plants, and account for that energy usage in your energy audits and your benchmarking. Now, it's one thing to go out and say, hey, is that building performing well relative to other buildings? But what universities are really interested in doing is to continually improve their buildings and provide great environments for their students and for their researchers. And so now we're really quickly into an energy audit discussion. And if you just stop and think about it for a second, the questions that you would ask to do an in-operation benchmark and the questions you would ask to do a level 1 energy audit are very close to the same. And so when we developed Building EQ, we built into the ASHRAE standard 211 a level 1 energy audit. So this is clearly called out in the standard. Nice thing about using a compliance standard is it allows the university to bid the work out and consistently describe what they want. They can ask a third-party contractor to do an energy audit on one of their buildings and say, we expect you to meet the ASHRAE standard 211 level 1 audit, and we want the deliverables from that. So once that commercial discussion is had, the Building EQ can help you get that level 1 audit, because we're going to ask, we've added in the extra questions that you would need for a level 1 energy audit, and we can actually extract out of our benchmarking review what you need to generate a good chunk of the level 1 energy audit. So one of the things it'll do is you can see here is you can get the reports over in here. As part of a level 1 energy audit, you're going to get this request for energy efficiency measures. As you do your walkthrough and you look at the preliminary data, you're saying, what are the immediate opportunities? Should you relight the building and go to LEDs? Should you look at fixing the ventilation system and how that side air is bringing better building controls? Whatever those are, you want to capture that early. And you can imagine that a university with multiple buildings on it has all these contractors that are providing this information to them and saying, on this building over here, this residence, we recommend a bunch of improvements, but over on your university, on your academic building, we have a different set. The Building EQ has a library of energy efficiency measures built into it that you pull down, and so everybody's going to use consistent language. So one third-party contractor is going to say, we're going to relamp. You're going to see that language as being the same between the two, and you're not going to have to try to see the different styles of reporting back from the different contractors that might work on it. You get very consistent results. You can sort that, and it'll allow you to prioritize where you want to make investments in the university to get the best return on those investments. So nice thing about the EEMs is you'll get consistent results back for all the different building types. And so one of the other things that we did was, as part of the 211 requirements, is you have to generate a document. And so we have a standard template built into Building EQ that will allow the person, the contractor that's using the tool to do the audit in a building, to go and generate a report that will be consistent in its look and feel with all the other ones. So, over the course of a year, if you had 20 or 25 of your buildings audited, it would be nice if they all lined up the same, the reports lined up, the flow of the reports was the same. They're using the same language in the EEMs, those energy efficiency measures, and this is something that Building EQ will allow you to do, and it will actually help you with the cost of that, because these templates are all set up and ready to go. They're just going to go in and pull it up and edit it in MS Word, and then they can forward it to the university as their deliverable. So great way to get consistent reporting from a wide range of people that are going to work on something the size of a university. Last thing we want to talk to you about is a connection with ASHRAE and its student activities and its student programs. And so this started presidential member Tim Wentz, where he created a course for his students at his university that was both the in-class theory part, and then he connected his students with the facilities people at University of Nebraska and allowed them to get hands-on experience to go into a building and do an energy audit. And that program was so successful at his university that ASHRAE went on and worked with APA, and we actually created a 12-week university-level module, and we've created all the PowerPoint templates and everything that you would need for the professor to do the in-class part. And then we worked really closely with the APA team, who are the facilities people, to say, hey, when you get to the practical portion of doing one of these energy audits, that you can come along and have the students go out and work on a building and actually be one of the buildings that was going to be on the list to be audited. So everybody wins. The students get hands-on experience, the university gets an energy audit out of it, the facilities people get some extra help, and they engage the students in real hands-on practical experience. So these pictures you're seeing here on the side were some work that was done by the Florida Tech students for the Brevard School, public schools. It's around Cape Kennedy. And they actually, these tech students went out and actually audited some schools and provided that to the school board, and the school board used that information to help do their energy improvements on that. And so that program's available to download, the academic program, and there are other examples out there where students have been really successful to do it. So, and students use the Building EQ tool as a way to do that energy audit. So to get that hands-on experience and to use a tool in a real-world application. So that's a little bit about how Building EQ and universities connect. So check it out. Go to the ASHRAE website. It's free to use this tool. Just go in, log yourself in, play around with the menus. And if you are associated with the university, either you work at the university, or if you are a contractor or somebody that consider a university a close customer, think about how the Building EQ could help you meet the needs of your important customer. Thanks a lot.